hereby call to order this special meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I'll now open the floor for public comment. Is there anyone here in the boardroom wishing to provide public comment? Seeing none, Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online wishing to provide public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, did anyone receive correspondence for public comment this evening? Thank you very much. I will now close public comment and we'll move on to discussion, law enforcement, fire and rescue communication systems. Mr. Miller, would you lead us off, sir?
Yes, ma'am. If you recall in your presentations that we did for the CIP for this current fiscal year, as well as the multiple years that we provided you, one of the major projects obviously was this law enforcement / emergency services communication system. And I believe at the last meeting that we had in a work session format, you had instructed us to come back with a little bit more detail about how the process would work in terms of procuring it and then also the financing. And I know that some of the discussion was centered around kind of these bigger projects that we have that are out there in future fiscal years that would require some financing beyond the annual CIP allotment. And so the sheriff had asked, obviously, that you guys have a work session before the end of the year. And we also have, I believe, representatives from Motorola here. And we also have Kyle Lau, who is with Davenport and Associates. And if you can look at the way the agenda is kind of set up, what we thought about is maybe revisiting the scope, revisiting the profile of the system and what all is entailed. And then we can talk about the procurement options, and then we can talk about financing options. I think that the way best, in my opinion, would be that we kind of handle it in that kind of way. There's some really a variety of things that we can do in terms of the procurement options and also in the financing option. And so I just kind of wanted to kind of lead off with that and again, reintroduce the project and let you know that, we are prepared to receive whatever direction you guys want to provide. So Sheriff and Chief Basson, do you guys want to handle the first part?
Welcome, Sheriff Giles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you very much for accommodating this meeting this week. It's very much appreciated that you set aside some time so we could discuss this. I think between this meeting, there's a couple goals that we need to try to meet. One is a way forward. We need to find a way forward in this project, and I think there's several avenues that we could go with this project. But I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with the fact that this project needs to be done. It's got to be done and done in a timely manner. And I would not disagree with Supervisor Bush's comment last week where it needs to be looked at thoroughly. I certainly don't want to jump into a pool of water and not know how deep it is before I jump. So without any misunderstanding, the goals that we try to accomplish tonight, it would really be good if we could possibly at least understand that the system that we're doing is completely compatible with a lot of the subscribers that we already have through Motorola. And that is one of the reasons why I do have the Motorola representatives here. We've been dealing with Motorola for the past 35, 40 years without an issue, and we've always been satisfied with their service to us. So those are most of the reasons why that we keep talking about Motorola and have Motorola here is because, again, the equipment we have is compatible with the equipment we're looking to buy, and our subscribers that we have are certainly compatible with using that. And if we had to change to another radio system, then it would obviously cost more because we need to re-up the subscribers. So without me really taking too much more of y'all's time, because I do know that you set time aside for us to be able to do that. I'm going to ask Jeremy to come forward and go ahead and go through our slideshow as far as what the proposal for this new radio system is. Because I don't think I need to go into why we need the system. I think just what the system is and what you guys, we would be purchasing. So Jeremy, if you come forward, please.
Welcome, Mr. Thomas. Would you like the podium? And that way, Sheriff Giles, you can stay in your seat.
Thank you.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good evening, board. Thank you for having me. Appreciate having the opportunity to come speak to you again. I think last time we met was end of October. So what we have are a sort of consolidation or condensed version of some of the slides that we presented last go around. So if you would, we'll jump right in. Again, I'm Jeremy Thomas, account manager of Motorola Solutions. Oh, and we do have a clicker. Okay, perfect. Does this work? All right. So we'll jump right in, and starting off with there's 3 phases to the project. And phase 1 addresses the critical need, which is the infrastructure of the system for the public safety communications, addressing first and foremost, making sure we have equipment that's replacing your end of life equipment that we're now having challenges with maintaining, and then taking the opportunity to address some other concerns with improved reliability and particularly radio coverage throughout the county. So to achieve that, today you have a 3-site tower site system. We would expand that to 6 tower sites to get you the coverage that the first responders require. Changing frequency band from the VHF band to the 700 megahertz. That affords you interoperability with many more, particularly your biggest interoperability partners with Fredericksburg and Stafford, Spotsylvania. You go up into Northern Virginia, and everyone's in the same 700, 800 megahertz frequency band. We have replacing dispatch consoles, other networking equipment, and then we've got new radio subscriber summit for Sheriff's Office as well as Fire and Rescue. This is going to be a digital system. It's a standard based on Project 25 and allows you interoperability with your mutual aid partners and a whole host of other additional features such as encryption, GPS, other efficiencies, time savers like over-the-air programming, things of that nature. So it's many leaps forward into the future, bringing the county up to speed. So any questions on phase 1? If not, we'll move on.
Go down the line, Mr. Granger.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming out. Really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us. You said we're switching from, it would be the proposal to switch from VHF to the 700 megahertz.
Yes, sir.
Could you, you might have said it, and I apologize if I missed it. The VHF paging channel at all 6 sites, what exactly is that?
So today you use VHF for paging. Those are you see the pagers on the hip that first responders or fire and rescue folks wear. We would maintain that today, so you would not have to replace those pagers.
Okay.
It's a cost savings to the county. It provides good coverage today, so we would utilize that and just expand it out to the new sites.
So there's not a concern with that communications band being inhibited in any way, because I know that there's some concerns with it being used for everything in general.
For voice communications,
Okay.
When you're transmitting and receiving, now paging is a one-way type of communication.
Okay.
So the folks in the field will receive that page, but don't have to respond for communications back to dispatch or to other folks. You'd use your radio, and so it really works well for paging.
Okay.
When in the voice world where we have more challenges with VHF.
I appreciate it. Thank you much.
Thank you. Great question.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill? Ms. Bender?
Yes, for the 100 portables, that's for the fire, FREMS.
Correct. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Did you want to carry on?
Great. So in phase 2, we would like to bring some of the county departments onto the radio network, make this truly a county network where you don't just have first responders, but you can also interoperate with other agencies as well. So at this point, we've already got the infrastructure in place, and now we're just bringing more user agencies and groups onto the radio system and leveraging that existing network. So we've got the General Property Service Authority, so on and so forth down the line. making sure we're taking care of everyone here. And then similarly, in phase 3, we will bring the schools on board. So school transportation, administrative staff, so forth. Last slide here is just the pricing of each of the phases. And, we look at this as approximately a 2-year, 24-month project, start to finish. There's time involved with zoning and licensing approvals, permitting. We've done a cursory look at potential tower sites, but there may be sites where we have to build a shelter, build a tower. So that takes time. That's really the lengthiest part of the whole process is any civil work and site acquisition, things like that.
My colleagues have questions.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So 3 phases, you said the total would take about 24 months. That's the plan.
Yes.
How long would the proposed time for phase 1 take? It seems like it's probably the lion's share of the work. So
That's where the 24-month period really is taken up. Phase 2 and phase 3, we can manufacture subscriber. Now, it is a challenge today, I will say, with supply chain issues. We've been affected just like just about every industry out there. Typically from an order of subscribers would take 2 to 4 weeks is now 8 to 12 weeks, right, Drew? So we're experiencing that right now. But once we can nail down those quantities, those options for those subscribers, like I said, we can have those deployed in the field within 3 to 4 months. So we don't look at, and that can be done in conjunction with the 24-month project. It doesn't have to be done serially. We can do that in parallel and have those phases overlap. So it's really the construction that takes up the bulk of the time of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill.
Just jumping back a couple of pages, Wave smartphone app.
Yes, sir.
What's that?
I can go back to that slide if you'd like. Any here. Set on here.
Next slide, phase 2.
Oh, phase 2? I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Very good. So that is a push-to-talk application you can put on any broadband device, cell phone being most common, to interface with the radio network. So instead of buying a portable radio or a mobile radio that costs many thousands of dollars, to be frank, you can put an application on someone's cell phone and have them communicate over the radio network. Now, we'll say it's not mission critical because you're using your cell carrier to connect to the radio network. So it's not a replacement for those first responders, but it is a tool where you can use your broadband device to communicate with those folks that are out in the field. And you can be outside of the county. We go to conferences or sheriff's conference that are in Roanoke or other parts of the state and still be able to communicate with folks back home.
So that's basically all the features on a portable on your phone.
Just for it's for voice communications, right?
Well, right, but it's not just my phone to your radio. It's the whole network, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the timing, I know you just said it, but for 2 and 3, did you say those are just 2 to 3 months for those?
To deploy those radios, have them in the field and programmed, right? We'd be looking at about a 2 to 3 month to 4 month period. And again, that can happen in conjunction with the phase 1, 24 months of the project. So, and these numbers we've shown again are budgetary. We consider them not to exceed. So I know we've discussed competitive procurement contracts and things like that. So we'll make sure that we have our pencil sharpened and the county can leverage existing agreements that have taken place in Virginia and many scales of magnitude that we can pass on that benefit to the county as well. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender.
Yes, I have a question. You had mentioned zoning and acquiring tower sites. how much of an added cost, or is that built into these figures?
That is comprehensive of those costs in these figures. So,
And do you see a challenge of acquiring, I think you said 3 sites, correct?
correct. Yes. So we'd like to leverage your existing 3 sites and just simply add on, so we don't have to relocate any existing sites, and just supplement that with new sites. So we've identified some tower locations that are existing that we think will work out, and there's one site we may have to build new. So, but we're looking at other options for that. But again, that cost is included in the numbers we have for you today.
All right, thank you.
So I had a question, the next slide, phase 3, please. And I'm not sure if this question is more appropriate for you or for Sheriff Giles. So Sheriff, feel free to jump in. So first of all, has this been socialized with the school board or school administration?
Not that I know of.
Is there a plan or intent to do that to make sure that what you're requesting would meet their needs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so, and then that's my next question. So you're saying it's based on what they currently have. So from having worked in the schools, so for example, not talking about bus transportation, but in the school building and administrative staff, I know typically each building administrator has an assigned walkie-talkie. Would that, which is used for internal communications in the school, would this replace that? Where would they just go on a different channel? They could be internal still within the school and then go to a different channel and be external countywide on this system.
From what I understand, what they currently have is not compatible with what this system is.
Right,
So the idea was each school would have a base station in the office.
right.
And then there would be a couple of portables allocated for like the principal and the admin staff that they would have to carry around in conjunction with the radio they have, unless what they have would be compatible, and then we could put them on one radio. But from what I understand, they're not compatible.
And I wouldn't guess that they would be, because so then I know, so typically the building administrators each have a walkie, and every grade level chair also has a walkie. So that would be just their internal communications. That would not accommodate.
This is not intended to replace what the school uses on a day-to-day basis.
Gotcha.
They'll still use what they currently have. This is just in conjunction with that in case they would need, fire rescue or the sheriff or whatever. And that way, that would give them a direct communication with us.
Okay. So could someone reach out to the school board office and socialize this with them?
The reason we haven't yet is because that was in phase 3, and originally we proposed to only do phase 1, and then phase 2 and phase 3 would be at a later time. But,
Sure.
But if you're interested in doing it all at one time, we can get with them now.
I don't know that we're interested in doing it all at once, but I think we need to have all of the information so we can make the right decision to know what the total package is going to look like and what the price tag is going to be. Does that make sense? Do my colleagues agree with that or not? Yes? Yes? Okay, yeah. So Sheriff, if you could work on that, so we have some idea of what phase 3 looks like, and if these numbers will meet the school's needs for external communication with public safety, I think
Yes,
that'd be
ma'am.
helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, did you want to continue, sir? Thank you.
So really after phase 3 had our pricing slide, and then of course that brings us to the ongoing support and life cycle of the radio network. So as we mentioned before, this proposed radio network has no end of life in our roadmap. And so how do we achieve that? So through our comprehensive maintenance plans, we'll continue to maintain the system, and then over time, over a cadence of years, we'll do upgrades to make sure that no piece of hardware or software is ever out of support in the network. And that keeps you maintainable, and then also brings new technology and features to keep you up with up to date as technology moves forward. So, any questions on the support and life cycle?
Mr. Granger, Mr. Stonehill, Ms. Bender. All right, carry on.
And that brings us to the end. So,
All right, members, do we have any other questions for Mr. Thomas or Sheriff Giles or Chief Basham before we bring it back to Mr. Miller for next steps?
I have one quick question.
Go ahead,
Madam
Ms.
Chair.
Bender.
What is your definition? I hear the term subscriber. What is a subscriber?
yeah, great question. Absolutely. I know we use a lot of technical jargon sometimes. We get too wrapped up in it, but really, subscriber is just a portable radio, which is what you'll see our public safety folks wearing on their hip with the speaker microphone, and then the mobile radio is what goes into the vehicle. So sometimes that's mounted right there in the dash of the vehicle, or could be in their trunk in a remote configuration. But those would be the subscribers.
Thank you.
Mr. Stonehill, did you have any others? Okay. All right. Sheriff Giles, did you have anything else you wanted to add, sir?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Just
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for accommodating us. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Miller.
So I think the next thing that we had listed was just to discuss the procurement option. And guys, you can still sit there, I guess, sit in the hot seat, right? No, I'm kidding you. I think that's the next thing, is that obviously we all know, and Mr. Thomas did a good job of presenting that there's a need and there's a plan of how this process works 24 months out and whatever the timeline is. And we will circle back with the schools, because there would obviously be some life cycle costs that they would inherit if they get this system, as well as the other aspects of the departments under phase 2 would have that. I think that the next thing that we had talked about with the sheriff and with Chief Basham is the procurement options. I think that the last conversation that you all had with us was we talked about the Suffolk City procurement or contract, and I think that we have found that one is problematic in terms of doing a rider on that. And so I don't know if we have some other ones. Donna, if you or Kelly want to chime in at this point. I know that the chief was talking with you all about some other options or some other contracts. So you understand the concept of obviously a rider, that if you have a governmental entity that exists and they are using a particular contract, you can utilize those contracts at open procurement. And so I think that the concern was at the last meeting, you all were under the impression that that's a possibility. But I think we've looked in that one, maybe expiring at the end of this year. I think Kelly looked at it as well and said that there's some issues in terms of it's not necessarily the like product, which that creates a problem. And so therefore we have to kind of relook at that. So if we can find an option that's out there in the state, then there's a way to piggyback on those contracts. The other option then becomes we start a procurement process, and that would require, an RFP. Essentially, we develop the scope, we develop the profile of that, and we issue that. And that's usually, how long of a process is that?
It takes 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Generally, once you post your RFP and go through that process with your interviews and everything that's involved, and then the contract building.
But if we had an existing contract somewhere out there in the state, that's a process of what's the time frame on something like that?
Well, the Virginia Information Technologies Agency does have contracts with Motorola and numerous other companies as well out there on their site is for all state and locality agencies throughout the state of Virginia. My one question to Jeremy is that this contract has got a huge pricing list. And so I looked at it some today in between other things. So I don't fully understand what this is in relation to this, to make sure that they do match up apples to apples. Because then if it does match up, that could be a much quicker process.
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
And happy to address any contractual questions. So we have numerous contracts in Virginia. I know Suffolk's been one that we've talked about for a while. And I think that's been extended a number of years. And unfortunately, I think they're at the end of the number of extensions they're willing to commit to on that one. So there are other options as well. Didn't want to propose that was the only option. And as you mentioned, the Virginia IT VITA contract is another very, very popular one. A lot of localities, Stafford County is now using that one as well, are using that in the state. It's an enormous price book because it's just about everything that Motorola sells under the sun, and that's body cameras, video cameras, radio equipment. I mean, you name it. So it's enormous, but I can tell you anything that we proposed would be included in that contract as well. So that's another option. MW Cog has a contract so they all have rider clauses, and be happy to work with county council and yourself and find the right language and right contract that you'd like to leverage for that procurement.
And so just for everyone, MW Cog is Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Miller?
I guess another question, and maybe we haven't covered that, is, so if you build your timeline of 24 months, are there some critical things that have to occur? For instance, the system that we have is going offline in 6 months, or it's going offline in 24 months or 22 months. And so I guess I'm saying is that if the board made a decision somewhere in the future, in the next month or so, or February 1st or January 10th, I don't know, I'm just throwing those dates out, you move forward 24 months, what impact to our existing system is there, or is there a concern that these guys have that somehow it's going to go offline, or I'm trying to use the technology. I know that the tech guy behind me would tell me I'm not using the right terminology, or Chris or Steve would say that. But is there some things that are driving this decision right now?
The equipment that we have now isn't covered. They're end of life, and if it was covered, the price to get the part would be parts for the system instead of refurbished parts that we grab off of eBay. And I'm saying that sarcastically, but we had an amplifier go down where Motorola went out and found one that was compatible and was able to make it work. Fortunately, had they not done that, we would have lost our tower site in Dalgar. So the critical need for this radio, and to get it pushed forward as quick as we can, as thorough as we can, is the fact that the majority of the equipment is end of life. And it's going to cost the system to Band-Aid it to keep it moving until we can get up and running. So that's the urgency for it. It's not all of a sudden one day it expires and we're done. It could literally break tonight. And then we'd be out searching for parts, or Motorola would be searching for parts to replace them at cost, which is going to cost more than if they were still had life under a maintenance agreement.
Right. And the reason I ask that is just to help the board in terms of the framework of their decision-making on this, so that they can understand, obviously, the longer it goes, the longer we are in a risk zone in terms of things not working. I agree. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Welcome.
I have the Motorola shop here in Fredericksburg, and we maintain the county's equipment, and we do the school radio stuff. But in a nutshell, we've got 2003 computers that are operating the system. And so just try to imagine trying to fix a computer from 2003. It just can't be done. And so that's what we're up against now. That's the simplest analogy there. We can patchwork it, but we've been working since 2018, trying to stay ahead of when Motorola provided this excellent support. Motorola provided this excellent support in 2018 to get us through the replacement equipment that they had, and that's just ending. It's over now. So we're doing the best we can, and we'll keep things up and running. But
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I think that everybody on the board that I can read from their discussion back in October is they're supportive of this. They just need to figure out the best way to move forward. I don't think that there's anybody that's opposed to this.
absolutely not. We just live it a little bit like the sheriff and I live it. So we're on 24-hour call with this thing too. So when it breaks, we're up with it. So
Thank you, Mr. Wine. Mr. Miller?
Review of how we could proceed on this. Or do we need some more information? Okay. I was just asking Ms. Lackey the best way to proceed, and I think we need to get, maybe the next step would be to get some more information about some of these contracts that are out there, and then we can then go through them and make sure that we're legal on that end. Is that something that you would want?
Was that yes? Consensus? Yes, Ms. Bender? Sorry.
One
of them.
of the
pieces, yep.
information sources I needed.
Yep. So that's the procurement piece, right? Yep. So then the next would be financing options, which might be the other piece you're looking for. Are we ready to move on to that?
And I guess going back to the procurement piece, and I might have to put you on the spot for a sec. If we did find a contract that is provided obviously by Motorola and meets our needs, is it a blind process? In other words, Mr. Thomas cannot be involved in it, or is it a process where they still can be involved? We just are piggybacking on that. I just wanted to make sure that whatever way we go on the procurement, we're not going to somehow taint it if we do something wrong. Does that make sense?
It does. If we do conclude that we have a cooperative procurement contract that we can utilize, then we have to use as Donna was saying, we have to use the costs that are specified in that contract, but we can have direct negotiations, or not negotiations, we can have direct contractual negotiation of a rider of a contract that parallels an existing contract. So that's the key. We have to find a contract that we're comfortable using that meets the specifications and the equipment that's necessary for this project.
Thank you. Before we move on, members, anyone have questions for council?
I do. Do you think that, but this could be complicated based on how old our system is, right? Finding a rider, it could be.
It could be. It looks like some other agencies or jurisdictions have been in the same boat and kind of building from scratch. So we're hopeful there's something out there we can use.
All right, thank you.
All right, then, Mr. Miller.
Okay, so the next step that we talked about was the financing options. And I know I've had some conversations with some of y'all that you obviously have a number of big projects that are on the horizon. You have the preschool, you have the radio system, you also have a fire station and a numerous of other major projects that are on the list. In talking with Kyle at Davenport, we have discussed ideas of how you could pursue this in kind of a multi-project mode. I know it kind of factors into where things right now are over the last month and a half that you've been kind of pummeled with about reassessments, and Ms. Hart has been hit pretty hard about that. So we're very cognizant of that. But I do think that one of the things I would assure is that whichever direction we go and we get this thing secured in the next several weeks or whatever, we do have the ability to find a way to finance it, either moving forward in a multiple project way or moving forward in an individual way. And that's why we wanted Kyle, and he's available to answer any questions. It's certainly something that, we have discussed as a way of moving this project forward.
So what is the pleasure of the board? Do we have questions for Kyle? He's here this evening. He came out here. He, I'm sure, carved out time from his schedule to accommodate us. Mr. Granger?
I would love the opportunity to ask.
Welcome.
I'm a little surprised.
Yep.
I thought Mr. Lau came out here for fun, honestly, but I appreciate you coming out. Thank you. I really do appreciate you coming out here.
Yep.
So, as Mr. Miller spoke, and I know you've spoken with him, looking at whether maybe to do a multi-project kind of bond or some other smaller way to go. In regards to looking at that, we do have a number of projects, and my gut reaction would be to probably say try to do some multi-project one, because I'm going to ask you the rates. How are the rates right now?
They're still very, very attractive. I mean, if you take yourself back roughly a year or so ago, we did the courthouse financing. You think about that whole process whereby it was a courthouse. We kind of had multiple elements incorporated in it for a variety of reasons, but one of which is because we get some economies of scale of going through that whole process once, as opposed to kind of piecemealing it with different kinds. And so the quick answer to your question is rates remain very attractive. Sort of bouncing around historical lows. You never know how long that's gonna last. You have no control of that. We have no control over it, but still a very good time in terms of borrowing costs.
So that's why, to me, it sounds like it'd probably be advantageous maybe to look into maybe trying to acquire enough funds to cover multiple projects. Would you agree with that instead of trying to play the waiting game? I can't imagine they go lower, I guess, is where I'm kind of going.
Yeah, that's one of those whereby we saw them go lower last year because of a pandemic and all kinds of other reasons. So it's not to say they can't go lower, but they've got a whole lot more room to go up than they do to go down, certainly. And I think to echo Mr. Miller's point is, as we've looked at all of this, you have the capacity to finance, a radio system in around, whatever number that was, $11-12 million. So if that gives you some comfort this evening, you've got that ability. I think what we would recommend to you, no different than we've done in the past and you're suggesting now, is let's understand where that fairly substantial investment fits within the overall picture of what you as a board and a county want to do over the next several years, knowing you've got the preschool and the fire station and other things. Make sure we bundle that appropriately, not just so that when we go out and finance it, we're doing multiple things at one time, but also understand how we fit those projects together with respect to what your budget and your cash flows are going to look like, all of which we're prepared to do with Mr. Miller very quickly, in the new year, given the timing of it. So it makes some sense to us, I think, to be thinking, especially knowing that you've got a pretty big CIP that we talked about a couple months ago, and just sit down again and do the old, not that I'm handy, but do the old measure twice, cut once with respect to going and financing it.
So would we look to possibly refinance any of our existing debt? Would there be any possibilities there, or?
We could. My gut reaction, and don't hold me to this, is that we've done so much of that and capitalized on it the last couple of years. There's probably not much to do there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's because we've been able to take advantage of it the last couple of years. But to the extent there's some opportunities, and absolutely, as we go through that process, that's just a natural part of what we'll do, is say, all right, if it's a radio system, or if it's a radio system and a preschool, whatever it is, let's also, while we're going through that process, see if there's things we can refinance for savings purposes.
Okay. That makes sense. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Think I'm good for it. But
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill?
Thanks for coming out, Kyle. I'm just wondering, in the next few years, when this ride that we're on right now is what's going to happen, look into your crystal ball and say, once this bubble we're on right now bursts, what are the rates going to do? You gotta think off in the future here.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no way to know. And Mr. Granger's points to start with, rates have further to go up than they do to go down. And so I think that's a pretty reasonable way to be thinking about it, wherein if we know we've got a basket of projects that you as a board want to consider and want to move forward with, we know interest rates continue to be favorable, let's see how we can put that together, responsibly within our policies, and importantly, making sure it fits within the budget, which is just that kind of year we're in, meaning your time of year. We're finishing up, with the audit and everything, and then moving very quickly into the next budget cycle. And so our mindset, really following Mr. Miller and Donna's lead, is to kind of put some of those pieces together for you, with radio and other things, and see if there's some things that you as a board want to do and how you capitalize on that. Maybe how we take it in bites. We can talk about all that, but again, rates are very low, and I think, again, as a takeaway, in our opinion, you have the capacity to do the radio system if that were the only thing you were thinking about.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see what it looked like doing a lump with all of our little projects put together, and then break them down and see what they look like individually, and see what the best way for us to go forward on it is.
Yep, we certainly can do that.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender?
I know previously it has been mentioned to do a contract directly or financing directly from the supplier. What kind of interest rates difference is that between competitively sending it out for other banks?
Yes, it's a good question. The only way to really know that is to go and competitively bid it. There's, between being in Virginia and being as solidly rated as you are with your credit ratings, you have a lot of different ways to go finance a capital project. We have state programs that are very well run. We've used those in the past. We have direct bank loans, of which lender financing kind of falls within that general umbrella. If the financing is large enough, we can go out to the capital markets like we did with the courthouse and the other things. And so the short answer to your question is no, really no until you put it into competition. Certainly if there's a specific number or something to look at, we can always, sort of look at it on our end as to its reasonableness. But the best way to go see that is to go competitively, look through the various options, whether it's banks, whether it's the public credit markets, or one of the state agencies.
And then my other question, because especially with all of the tax reassessment and our constituents being very upset by that,
Yep.
This is going to drop in a $10 million bomb on them. Would, could we handle, I know you've mentioned we could, but all the 4 projects, I guess, would be the correct number. Is this financially pushing it a little bit?
Well, that's in fairness what we want to come back in probably the January timeframe and talk about. So if all we were talking about was a radio system, that would be a much different discussion than if we were talking about a radio system with a series of other projects. And so that's where I think it's important to come back early in the calendar year as you're working through your budget, knowing your assessments have come in, whereby we're certain you're hearing from the taxpayer side, but it also is an increase to the value of their asset. And knowing some of the other critical variables of King George County, a landfill, some of the big needs out there. I think what we'd really like to do is have a good discussion early in the calendar year about how all these different things fit together with respect to the reassessment, the budget, the radio financing, the other projects. Because I think you've got an opportunity there within all of your purview to say, all right, here's what makes some sense to us, given some information we can give you.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. I don't have any questions that haven't already been asked. Mr. Miller, do you have something you'd like to add, sir?
Yes, ma'am. 2 things. First of all, I think when you package projects together, there is a tendency for some people to think, well, what happens if one of them goes much more than what was budgeted? Is that going to impact the other projects? And I think that's a question I would ask Kyle. Is there a way to set up, and it probably is more for Donna too, is there a way to make sure that if we have these multiple projects and we have the radio system and the radio system is set at a good budget, but the preschool comes in more, we're not going to rob Peter to pay Paul or not? I mean, we can control that. The ratings agencies would probably be very unhappy with us if we started changing projects after they've approved a issuance.
Yeah, that's right. There's going to be a couple different levels of sort of safeguards to the extent that's the desire of the board that can be put in place. A piece of it will probably be on the legal side in terms of how the various resolutions are drawn up that the board would approve. And then some on the call it the financing documents that can be built in as well. So that absolutely can be accommodated and oftentimes is.
Okay. The other one I had is maybe for purposes of Ms. Bender, when you asked the questions of the rates, could you just put in perspective, what was the rate for the courthouse issuance?
Yeah, so the courthouse last year, which was a 25-year financing, just that piece of it, there's a couple different components to it, but if you just broke that courthouse piece, it was in and around, off the top of my head here, about a 2.30 interest rate. So we were able to borrow 25 years, full, it's a big generational project and be around for a long time, 25 years fixed rate in and around about a 2.30 interest rate. So that's kind of, we see ourselves being in again, hopefully in about that range. Rates are a little bit higher right now than they were then, but on the margin, we're still talking about something that is historically very, very attractive.
All right. Anything else from members before we move on? All right. Thank you, Kyle. Mr. Miller?
That would be, the end of our presentation. I don't know if the sheriff or Chief Basham want to talk anymore. Any more you want to add to it? I think that going back on what Kyle indicated, what we did have and we still have is once everything gets settled down after the first of the year, sit down with you all, either individually or 2x2s, and kind of show you some analysis that we have. Obviously, it's it's something that's sensitive in the sense that we, given the current format or current atmosphere of where people are on your tax rates, and we don't want to give any kind of hint or any kind of idea to anybody because you have a process that you have to go through to set the tax rates. Any discussion that we have in regards to this, we certainly don't want to give anybody the impression that you're telegraphing or that you're already saying this is the amount that you're going to do. And I think, unfortunately, that could get construed that way. So we want to be very careful about that. These are just options. These are just scenarios that we're going to provide you. But clearly, there's a budget process that's coming up. And clearly, you have a duty as the Board of Supervisors to set the next tax rate for the year. And so people need to understand that. This is an analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Sheriff Giles?
The other thing, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that you want us to come back to you with the school board or somebody in the school system that either yay or nay to phase 3, and that you also want us to research apples to apples contracts and be able to provide that as well. I just want to make sure I'm online with that.
Yeah, I think that was consensus of the board. Yes, those were two sort of the larger question marks we had about this, this here, this project. And then of course we do have, as we expressed to Kyle and the staff, we have other question marks as far as the whole picture, the whole financial picture, for next year, that it just is what it is right now. So. Yes,
ma'am, I understand. And again, I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your Christmas shopping schedule to come out and sit down and do this. And Kyle, thank you also for coming out and providing the information, Jeremy and Drew. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller.
I was just going to add that if, we will provide, as the sheriff summarized, we'll get that back to you. And I'd like to propose that we get that back sooner than later, sometime perhaps after the first of the year, because I do think that you can still make this decision about what to do about this procurement. And I understand the financing piece might be a piece of it, but and that's going to get provided up, it's going to get reviewed within the scope of maybe a bigger picture. But like Supervisor Stonehill said, he wants to see kind of how the individual projects would finance out on their own and then as a group. And so we will show you that. But I certainly don't want, I wouldn't want the sheriff to think that, we're going to advocate for, the decision-making is part of a big package. That's up to you guys. We can provide it either way. And that was the purpose of this, is that we can move in the direction of this project becoming a reality and deal with the financing at the same time. They can be going down parallel tracks. It doesn't mean that they're all part of anything and that somehow the sheriff and Chief Basham need to wait until July, when the budget goes into effect. I mean, we can make things and get things secure in terms of the procurement, and the financing comes in a different segment of that.
Very good. Questions from members? No? All right. Mr. Miller, did you want to move on to miscellaneous other business number 4? Did you have anything there, sir?
The only thing I had is that somehow if we could discuss, and it doesn't have to happen until after the first of the year, but we could discuss doing kind of a combination orientation for the benefit of Mr. Collins, Supervisor-elect Collins, or every other member who wants to be a part of it, but it would be kind of a legal overview. I think Ms. Lackey could provide that. And then we could also just to provide a general, this is what's going on in the departments. This is how they, what their services are. I think it's beneficial to any new member that they get to do that, but I obviously offer that to everybody. But it could also be just a combination of a strategic retreat, not necessarily go off or anything, but, have a kind of a work session format where we give you an update on where we are on projects, where we are in the budget process, and, perhaps get some strategic directions that you might want to go in for the new calendar year, I guess. It would be nice to, kind of get on a regular time frame where as we start to develop the budget, we've done some kind of goal setting so that we can kind of take your goals and kind of incorporate those into the budget. We understand what things need to be going on, but things happen and you have a new board coming in January. So I just was going to put that out, start letting you all think about that and give me some ideas, and we can go somewhere if you want. We can, wherever you want, we're available to you.
So, Mr. Miller, could you bring that back, please, at our December 21st meeting during your county administrator's report? And then maybe you can poll the board as far as the board's availability for when that type of meeting or work session or retreat, whatever you want to call it, maybe give us a couple ideas of what that could look like.
Okay.
And then we would have a better idea of what you're looking for and what the time commitment would be. And then we could look at the calendar in January for that.
Okay.
And that way, as you said, Supervisor-elect Collins is included as well. Okay. All right. Is there any other business to come before the board? No? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn until Tuesday, December 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.